Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Arabian Travel Market 2022 aviation session with myself, John Strickland. First of all, not only great to see you, but it feels great to be back here myself after 3 years to do this event in the flesh, for real, as opposed to the virtual events we've had of the last 2 years or so. Of course, the pandemic is not behind us, but airlines are looking ahead, and we're talking today about airlines evolving for the future. We're going to have a very interesting session for you in roughly the next hour, and we've got two great speakers from two key major performing airlines here in the Gulf, and so I'll waste no more time. We'll get straight on with the business at hand, and I'll invite my two speakers to the stage. So if you'd like to give a warm round of applause for Tony Douglas, CEO of Etihad Group. Tony, want to join us on the stage? And Adil Ali, Group CEO of Air Arabia. Well, as I mentioned here, we've had the challenge of COVID going on. I want to really run through with each of you, the background of your airlines against that challenge, what you've been doing during the challenge and since, and there's some overlapping business between your two respective companies, which we definitely want to touch on, and we'll look at some of the challenges that we're all facing anyway. So Adil, let's kick off with you. I mean, with COVID, hopefully the worst of it is over. And studying your financial results for the last year, I mean, they look to me, and I'm not just trying to flatter you, they look remarkable. You know, not just that you delivered a profit for the year, but each quarter within the year was profitable during 2021. Tell us a bit about the background of the last 2 years. How have you managed to keep the company going and indeed deliver this level of profitability?
It's great to be back and to see everybody around, and hopefully it will continue like this forever or for a long time to come.
I hope so.
I think the last 2 years was an interesting experience. By hindsight, we all became much more tougher to meet the world and the life challenges, but they were very difficult 2 years. And I think in this business, you had to, not knowing what the future looked like at the time, particularly in 2020, the world panicked. You just had to look after your cash and make sure that you don't spend much and operate where you can make little money. So we were preserved everywhere we could. And that was a good exercise, because in a way, and it's all by hindsight, in this business, you'll never get an opportunity to actually close the shop, clean it up, and start again. And we had a little bit of that, which brought a lot of efficiency, and that has reflected in our 2021 results.
Right. So when you say tidied it up and make it more efficient, I mean, you're an efficient low-cost airline. You should be saying that, Adil, because before, what else could you do? You changed the approach on network alone, I would think.
I think both Tony and I, and yourself, I guess, we've been in this business for a long time.
Too long.
And perhaps too long. I'm not retiring yet. I think it's a business that you have to find some saving every year. And there is efficiency to be driven all the time. And especially that a lot of what happens in an aviation industry is not necessarily controlled by the airline a lot. There are so much external factors. And you got to manage those all the time. And that's where you bring in the efficiency. And if you keep doing the same thing, then it becomes the syndrome of an old house. You got to clean it up from time to time. And that's where the efficiency comes from.
And in terms of the network development, I mean, just checking through your figures in the last few days, you've launched about 44 new routes out of the 5 hubs. But another challenge you have is being based in different countries. I mean, we've really had a big challenge with governments have been far from consistent, haven't they? I mean, I spoke to your CEO in Morocco during the last year, and Morocco was closed down completely for periods of time. The restrictions have been different elsewhere. Do you think the lessons have been learned now? Are governments going to be better prepared to work together if we have to go through something like this again?
I guess having multiple hubs and a double-edged sword. It makes it more difficult for you to manage, but at the same time, it gives you great opportunity. And if we sort of connect it to the COVID, what was interesting during the COVID period that, well, one area used to close down, another one open. Ironically, when UAE was closed, Morocco was open.
Right.
And Europe was open. And then the reverse happened. And that has helped us to carry through the time. We have expanded in the last sort of 2 years. To start with, in the middle of pandemic, July 2020, we obviously started a new airline, Air Arabia Abu Dhabi. And a lot of growth came from Abu Dhabi because when you set up a new airline, everywhere you go, it's a new port. Similarly, out of Morocco and Egypt, we have expanded, and we're looking forward to the future.
Absolutely. And I noticed you were quoted saying in an interview that many of the routes you fly, Adel, are routes that others aren't interested in, but others are not interested in them, but you've made them work. I mean, tell us a bit about that philosophy.
Well, I have not actually answered the second part of your questions about how the governments have learned. Yes. I think the jury's out. There's some countries and some places that we find that the government have seen what happened during the pandemic, and they did recognize that aviation is a big contributor to the economy of the country, and everything comes to a halt if airlines are not operating. Mm-hmm. We saw that recognition. At the same time, I think what is revealing nowadays that we're finding more and more certain government, particularly in certain part of the world, and one or two in this region, where they're becoming quite protective. Some even have moved from an open sky to a very protective sky. And those things are the signs of worry for the industry as a whole in the area.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a backward step, especially when the UAE, as both of you know, is open skies favourable. And I did a recorded interview also with Akbar al-Bakr a couple of weeks ago, and his biggest frustration, he said, was lack of liberalisation of the world as a whole. So that would be a backward step.
Very true, very true. So from a sort of how do you make a route work, you take a gamble sometime in life, and quite a lot of route. It's not that nobody made it work. Nobody tried it before, and quite a lot of times you tend to set up airline network based on data and statistics. But if actually no one ever flew on those routes, you don't have them. That's your background.
Yes.
So those are the times you got just to take a faith and a gamble. 60% of them work, 40% of them you have to stop at some stage, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that's how we do it. Pretty simple. Yeah,
good. And Tony, I'm going to touch on that point of view in a few minutes as well. I know you've had more attempts at that. And fleet-wise, Adel, you've stuck with the Airbus family over the years. You've now got around about 60 aircraft, I think, in the fleet. I think the last time I saw you, you hadn't yet taken delivery of 321 Neo LRs, but now you've got about 6, I think, in the fleet. How are they going? Have they made a big difference, not just in terms of size, but are you able to exploit what they offer in terms of range, for example?
So, we've got 60. We're getting a few more before summer, mainly leasing from the market, because the market have come back much faster, and we need to grow the business in Abu Dhabi, in 2 new airlines that we're setting up, one in Pakistan, one in Armenia. So hopefully we get them all operating by end of June. 321, I think as an aeroplane, it's a great aeroplane. From a cost point of view, extremely efficient. We do live in a very harsh environment, so the engines are new, and they have got 1 or 2 teething problems that need to be ironed out. But I know there is a lot of work is going in there. Hopefully by 24, when we receive our own order of 120 airplanes, those things have been ironed out. But great airplane.
And that order that you said, 120 aircraft, how much of that is going to be expansion and how much renewal? Because you've stayed relatively stable in fleet size for a number of years. So this is, almost double your fleet size now. Will it mean that you're 3 times bigger, or will some of it, I guess some will be replacement?
Yeah, I think I'm a conservative person, and our philosophy has been size doesn't matter to Air Arabia Group. Profitability does.
Yes.
So we're in a business of not how many aircraft we pile up, or how much money we make, and that's the drive. But when we put an order in back in the 2018 for the 120, Abu Dhabi hub was not on the plan. Pakistan wasn't, nor Armenia. At the time, the order was the organic growth of the other hubs we had and replacing the existing network. So we were expecting that we will end up with about 120 airplanes. I think given the other hubs and so on, probably time will tell, but we will continue ordering as required. The size, I would see it by about 2030. We should be either about 160 to 200 airplanes.
Right. So a big step forward. And a question, I don't know if I've asked you this before, I think I might have done in a dim and distant past. Would you ever consider looking at maybe the 220, the A220, because that aircraft seems to be really coming into its own. It's quite a big, well, it was a regional jet, but it's really become more than that. And I've noticed a number of airlines now have been putting in quite a lot of twin orders, going for a 320 family and the 220 family. Do you see any scope in that, maybe to top up, or some routes for you don't think are quite big enough for the larger 320 family?
I think the 220 and E2 of Embraer are both good airplanes that has come to the market,
yeah.
and the market needs it. We do operate domestic in Morocco, Egypt, and of course in the future we will be doing in Pakistan as well. So we have looked at both airplanes. I think both are very new airplane. Normally I would wait. I don't buy new cars or new airplanes. I'll wait to see how they perform. And we may, if the business requires, the order of 120 even has given us that flexibility.
Right.
To change some of the gauges if required to bring those in. So quite open. If the business needs it, by all means we will bring them in.
Okay, interesting. I'm going to come to the joint venture in a moment, but just to quickly, before I forget, that you've already touched on the other two new ventures announced in the last few months. The one in Armenia named Fly Ana, and in Pakistan, Fly Jinnah. Tell us a bit more about those two concepts. Are they still on track to launch in the next few months? And are they different in terms of who your partners are and maybe the approach you'll take?
I think from a time point of view, we hope that both airlines will be flying before summer. There's a lot of work going on, 2 separate teams, one in Pakistan, one in Armenia. And hopefully both will be operational by late June sometime.
Right.
From a structure point of view, it's absolutely no different. The only difference you will find is the brand name. It didn't make a lot of sense for us to be called Air Arabia Armenia or Pakistan. And it's important in our business, given it's people's business. Aviation is quite associated to the people's feeling, to give it the right name that the people can connect to. So Armenia has got the Armenian feel, and Pakistan has got under the name of the founder of Pakistan,
right? Okay.
Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So we call it FJ as the code.
And the markets, I guess, are quite different. I don't know so much about Armenia, but what I do know is about half the Armenians in the world are elsewhere. So I guess there's the immediate VFR opportunity.
Yeah, I think Armenia, we've been flying from here, from Egypt for the last 15 years. It's not a very big market. The population is about 4 million people, but there is a big Armenian population outside. And when you set it up, you don't need to be a very large airline. We look at Armenia, it'd be a nice hub with about longer term 10 airplanes. On the other hand, Pakistan, again, we've been flying to Pakistan since Air Arabia started. Similarly, there are Pakistani community around the world, and particularly in this part of the world, but also Pakistan itself. Its economy is doing extremely well, 200 plus million people. We see it as an opportunity, and we are very happy that we've partnered with the right team of people that we can grow and do something meaningful in that place.
Because Pakistan, as you say, it's a massive population, massive expat population, trade is growing, but in aviation has perhaps been slower than, say, India to grow. In India, we've seen a proliferation of airlines, including LCCs. Pakistan hasn't had that till now, so perhaps is this perhaps the beginning of a similar, flourishing, you could say, of the market there?
I think they've got 3 or 4 airlines already operating, and PIA has been operating for the last 80 or 90 years. But we hope that we would be able to contribute to development, the aviation, both domestic and international.
Thanks, Adil. And now turning to the joint relationship between the two of you in the airline business. Air Arabia Abu Dhabi, up and running since July 2020. It is a joint venture. Tell me about the way that came about. It'll dovetail into asking you, Tony, about what you've been doing in terms of reshaping Etihad. But on the joint territory, perhaps it would have seemed unlikely that a network airline like Etihad would be working with very much a primarily point-to-point LCC like yourself. So if you want to give some closing words in your spotlight session on this, Adil, and then I'll come on to you, Tony, for your perspective.
Air Arabia Abu Dhabi, I can't because he's my chairman, so I'll pass it to him.
So I think first of all, if I may go back a step, it's just really good being able to do something as normal as this again.
Absolutely.
And I guess I'm guilty whilst I've been sat here watching people walking past outside. It's the week after Eid, it's day 2. I didn't really expect to see as many people here. And I think it's yet another reflection that there is a huge pent-up demand to get back to the normality of travel, something that all of us enjoy, and clearly, the fundamentals to our collective businesses. In terms of Air Arabia Abu Dhabi, my dear friend on my right here and I had a plotting session at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix a number of years ago, and off the back of that we shook hands and said that we could see a clear opportunity in bringing all the things that we admire from Air Arabia's model in terms of an absolutely, obsessional focus on detail, safety, but also cost, in bringing that exciting product offering to travellers, to guests that flow in and out of Abu Dhabi, but also present another option to connect on our global network. So the ability now to buy a ticket on Etihad in New York and fly to Abu Dhabi and then connect onwards with Air Arabia Abu Dhabi, or vice versa, buying a ticket on Air Arabia Abu Dhabi, connecting via Abu Dhabi to Sydney, is something we saw great value and opportunity to develop. And I have to say, year 1 was exceptional, even as we were coming out of the pandemic. And I'll jokingly go back to the question, John, you asked of Adil earlier on. In my opinion, in our opinion, Air Arabia is the standout model within the region because of its excellence in everything that it does, but also the numbers don't lie. So these days, when I need a loan, I don't go to the bank. I go to my friend here because he's making that much money. You can see what I'm doing here. I'm tapping you up for a conversation later on. I joke, of course. But I guess the serious point is we were heavily engaged in a transformation process which started back in 2017. And that was an acknowledgement that we had become overstretched at the extreme and needed to conduct what I would describe as open heart surgery on our balance sheet to get us back into a sustainable commercial model. And again, I support, because we've got so many things in common with Ardal, and in terms of, whilst our business models, most might imagine that they're polar opposites, I would suggest there's actually more in common than not. So for us as well, big is not necessarily beautiful. What you can commercially sustain from a profitability point of view, of course, is the name of the game. And I'd humbly say we've learnt an awful lot more in working with Air Arabia than I'm sure that they've ever learnt from us. So on our part, this has been a marriage made in heaven.
Fantastic. And as you said, the airline is expanding now. How many aircraft is it now in the actual operation? How many aircraft?
Me or
Air Arabia, Abu Dhabi.
Right now, there are 4 operating. We hoping that we move before end of June to 7, and before end of the year to 10.
Okay. And I saw quite a bit of route expansion, including your hometown, so to speak, is coming on the network fairly soon to Bahrain and a number of Indian destinations.
Yeah, I guess, look, you need airports, airplanes, and people to fly on them. So wherever there's an airport and people are flying, we will give it a go. But looking at within the region, I think more and more people traveling. It is important to highlight Abu Dhabi has made huge investment on development of hotels, beaches, entertainment centers, and so on. And we feel that within the region and the areas that probably Etihad does not fly to, we could contribute in developing those tourist markets. And I think this is why sort of we expanding quite fast, because quite an attractive offer for people who want holidays. And the world now want that because everybody wants to travel again. And hence we sort of expanding a little faster in Abu Dhabi.
Well, as you say, I mean, many people are not aware outside of the region the way that Dubai has built up quite a big point-to-point market over the years. It's not all about connections. As you say, Abu Dhabi is doing the same thing because there's a lot to offer in this part of the world. And on that point, there's another airline who's arrived in Abu Dhabi, which is Wizz Air. I know when that was announced, I was a bit confused in terms of the ownership. There is, and Tony, if you could just maybe just give me a bit of background on this. There is an interest by Abu Dhabi as a country, I think, in Wizz Air. It's a different partnership, but does it work with you as well, or is it a standalone operation? Is it a competitor, basically?
Yeah, so I think just, again, if I may take a step back to one of the earlier questions, and Ardal's response was, there's so many places that we're now looking at connecting to that you would not have normally have found within Etihad's network.
Yeah.
And given our historical cost base, it would have been very difficult for us to have been able to make any of those work. So the Air Arabia Abu Dhabi connection extends the connectivity in and out of Abu Dhabi and gives a lot greater choice. And I think, if I may also point out the fact that there's probably many people in the audience who study the statistics in far more detail than I, but I think in year one, for it to be fully profitable, and it was, it's probably the only AOC within the region where that claim could ever be truly made in year one. And I think that was a testimony to the discipline that I referred to before, but the fact that this is strategic about getting greater connectivity, and your point about not just through traffic, but point to point is
Yes.
absolutely key for Abu Dhabi strategy. And therefore, I would argue that Abu Dhabi could do not just with Arabia Abu Dhabi, with Wizz, but arguably even a third or a fourth one. I believe Africa is hugely underserved currently. And if we look at likely growth projections over the next decade or more, I think there'll be opportunity to expand even further. Wizz Air sits under a different ownership and has not got a code-share connection with Etihad.
Right.
So they operate completely independently to the way in which Arabia Abu Dhabi and Etihad work together.
I mean, that's the way I would see it. I mean, if we think, especially being based in Europe, I see, Wizz Air and Ryanair or EasyJet, they're all competing every day, but there's a massive market for all of them. You and Ryanair in particular compete, especially in Morocco. You find markets, and Wizz Air has, even they flew into Abu Dhabi and Dubai even before they set up this venture, so they were bringing people from their market. So it seems to me that it's a pie that can grow for all of you. Tony, you touched on, what you joined, was it 2018 that you joined Etihad? You came in, and we've seen a real shift in approach from, Etihad was on a big expansion trail, had shareholdings, this named Equity Alliance with many airlines around the world. Some of those airlines, truth be told, were losing money themselves significantly, which wasn't helpful to you as a business. That's changed radically. You've already touched on it, but tell us a bit more about the journey, because you were starting to slim down dramatically even before COVID hit. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, it looks like, thank goodness, really, that was something already happening.
So Etihad's 18 years of age at this point in time.
Youngster.
So we're relatively young. I think it's fair to say in our earlier teenage years we made a few mistakes. I know, John, you probably wouldn't have done, but Adler and I will openly fess up, we probably did. But in terms of Etihad, it pursued a strategy of accelerated growth with a quasi-alliance component to that, as you say, the likes of Alitalia, Air Berlin, Jet, etc., etc. The orders that were placed for new aircraft off the back of the assumptions on what that growth would bring, and sadly a market that couldn't support it, and as a consequence a balance sheet that could no longer be serviced. So it was very much a case of open heart surgery to the balance sheet, and a radical restructuring, which was a 5-year plan. There was no quick fix, there was no black and white stick, magician's tricks or anything of that nature. It was back to basics. It was trying to create an airline where the fleet was driven by the network as opposed to the network was being driven by the fleet. And the cost base was one which was in keeping with what you then chose to put into place as an operating model. By the end of 2019, we were anything between 9 and 12 months ahead of where we planned to be, to the point where I think maybe one or two of the people here have heard me comment before. I was almost thinking, what could possibly go wrong now? And then, of course, just about everything went wrong, right? However, there's probably a few gifts, perversely, that have come out of the pandemic for us. One of is we had momentum at that stage. We had significant momentum. We had our best ever Q1 performance, which was in 2020, just as the pandemic was starting. So we smashed Q1. So we basically had the obvious choice to either go into denial, hunkering down and complaining why this could have possibly happened when we were doing so well, or elect to accelerate, which of course we went with. We had to make a lot more difficult decisions in terms of fleet reduction. Sadly, the size of the Etihad family, but as a consequence, having a cost base which is far more in line with what you would need to sustain a profitable airline in its own right. And I think here we are back to, ironically, the gift of the pandemic. Q1's performance for Etihad was $272.2 million EBITDA. So EBITDA is a proxy for free cash flow. We have never made money before in 18 years. The ball is now making a big mark in the back of the net. We're not getting carried away, quite the opposite. This is still work in progress, but what we've seen is a market that's come back like a fire hydrant going off. Yield is still reasonably good in terms of ticket pricing, but of course a big component of our business is cargo as well, and cargo yields have held up. So we've now got a cost base that works with load factors. Yesterday we were 84% network wide. We have been for the first 4 months of this year almost back to 2019 load factor numbers. So this is something that of course we hope will maintain itself, but we're certainly not getting carried away by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, you talked there, Tony, about one of the things you did was simplify the fleet, and I think I was reading recently, you quoted somewhere as saying it was an aircraft spotter's delight because you had pretty well almost one of every type of aircraft. But in terms of the larger wide bodies, the A380s, the Boeing 777s, the 330s, the 340s are largely gone. Just on the 380, I mean, it's a beautiful aircraft, of course, from a passenger point of view. Are you flying any, or are they all still grounded? Because I know Qatar, they said they were gone, but they're now flying a few for a variety of reasons. Etihad, of course, is, so Emirates rather is still using a large number. Are you open-minded about using them at all?
So I think probably a couple of things. 380 is an incredible guest proposition. Certainly the configuration on the 10 that we've got, 72 business class upstairs, an incredible first class product, is something we always used to get rave reviews about. But 30 years plus ago I started my love affair with commercial aviation, and I used to be the manufacturing director of BAE Systems regional aircraft, and we used to build the 146RJ, which was a lovely 4-engined 100-seat or thereabouts regional jet. Way back even then, I learnt the hard way that anything with more than 2 engines will never commercially sustain itself in this day and age. And I think the punchline is almost as blunt as that in one sense. Now, I would never say never, because back to ticket yield and cost base, if the relationship of yield versus cost allows us to bring any of those 380s back into the game, we would be delighted to present them to our guests. However, unless that equation is balanced off, we're not a registered charity. We won't be offering a product that might be delightful for the guest, but as my departed father always used to say to me when I was very young, as part of my commercial learning from him, is anybody can sell $10 for $5. And it's true. Anybody can sell $10 for $5. The trick is selling $10 for $11. And unless that equation therefore gets itself back to a point where we can commercially sustain it, it would be a $10 for $5 type of example. But inshallah, there might be a route to get some of those machines back into the sky, and we'd be delighted if we could do that.
Okay, but primarily you're focusing now long haul on the 787 Dreamliner. You've got a large fleet of those and more to come, and just recently taken delivery of the first A350. I mean, these seem to be the aircraft of the future in terms of efficiency. They're twins, obviously all the other issues about lighter materials, engine efficiency. I guess you're happy that you are in that position, having them as a mainstay of the long-haul fleet.
Yeah, for sure, John. Look, the two, wide-body aircraft of choice, I think everybody will acknowledge, is 787 and 350. Both largely composite aerostructures, so benefit with the performance and the weight reduction that comes from that. Both operating, in our case, Gen X on the 787 and XWB on the 350, next generation power, with the avionics and controls that go with it. So we're talking about machines that are 21 and 25% more fuel efficient than the kind of predecessor equivalent scale of machines. So when you look at it like that, that for us is definitely the stable of choice, and is therefore now the mainstay of our fleet going forward. And perhaps as a call out humbly, if I may, For anybody here who's not been onto the Etihad stand, and this is not a direct plug, albeit it might sound like one, if you go and take a look on the Etihad stand, what you will see is the all-new interior that's on that A350, and we think it's an absolute winner. All the feedback we've had from guests supports that statement. But our new business class, I think when you go and take a look at it on our stand, you would probably conclude is better than most people's first. It's therefore probably more applicable to describe it as a business plus. Private doors, the personal space that comes with it. But go take a look at our new economy product as well. So we think we've lifted the bar. So it's not just about becoming low cost base by diluting product. I think what we're talking about, and we've learnt a lot of this through Ardal and Air Arabia, is it's low cost by being effective and efficient and making sure that in no way do you ever dilute the quality of the product. And back to the example I've just given, I think you'll probably conclude when you go and take a look at it, if anything, we've significantly dialed it up.
And on the 777, Tony, the existing 777s, 300s are gone at the moment, but you've got orders for the 777X, or I think the 777-9. Are you still going to go ahead with those? Because that's a much bigger aircraft. That's almost 747 size, but much more efficiency. Do you still plan to go ahead with that a few years down the line?
Okay, so we sold our 777s back in 2019, early 2020, and we leased them back for a limited period of time. And we are currently phasing out those leases. Interestingly, we took the seats out of a number of them and used them as mini freighters during the pandemic to great effect. Very versatile machine, 300ER for all manner of obvious reasons, but nowhere near as fuel efficient as the next generation big twins. 350, 1000 would be a really good case in point on that. We do have an option on 777-9X in the future, but I think again many of you will have heard in the last month Boeing making it clear that they can't see a way to be able to deliver those way out to 25, 26 minimum. So we're not holding our breath on them. They're not in our network plan at this point in time until it becomes more real as an aspiration.
Okay. And on the 350, you're also the launch customer, I think, for the 350 cargo, all cargo aircraft, just announced.
Yeah, so we've signed a letter of intent, which is now being novated to a full contract with Airbus for 7 350 freighters. And I guess the way we would describe this is, if you go onto Flight Radar and look at the number of freighters that are in the sky, obviously doing very well at the moment, you'll see a whole bunch of old 747s, 767s, 757s, MD-11s, and the way I would describe them with a passion for aviation is they are the Ford F-150 pickup truck from 1986. In other words, they look great, they sound great, but they're not necessarily good for the environment. The 350 freighter is a composite airframe, again with the next generation engines that I've described, and is very much therefore the Tesla of the air freight market. So we've deliberately elected, given what we've been trying to do as well with commercial aviation sustainability, to go for the Tesla end of the freighter market going forward, and we see great opportunity in the way in which that aircraft could perform in that regard.
And just one immediate point on the 350, Tony. We've seen still playing out a very public dispute between Airbus and Qatar Airways about paint-related issues. There's been photos and stuff around. Several other operators who've had them over the last couple of years have said they've got issues. They haven't elaborated. Yours are brand new, but obviously, I guess, just tell us what you can. Are you having some dialogue with the manufacturer about that and them looking for a resolution of this?
Obviously, all I've got is the same insight as probably you and many other people in here, which is via the media. So I don't possess any greater insight to what seems to be a very public spat between Qatar Airways and Airbus. All I would say, and this is independent of the specific case, is composite aerostructures have a completely different property attached to them for obvious reasons, not least of which If you watch a 787 with its composite wings, from its maximum takeoff weight to a landing weight, they flex almost like a carbon fibre fishing pole.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what they're designed to do. The paint technology that goes on them is completely different.
Right.
So it's only the word paint that is a similarity. It is, from a molecular structure, from a science point of view, totally different. Now, what we saw, and a number of other operators did, on 787, so this has got nothing to do, obviously, with the Airbus situation, is after 3 or 4 years, UV in hot environments such as this region does have a habit, given the amount of flex in the aerostructure, to impair the adhesion of the paint. And in the case where we had some of these problems, we very constructively worked with Boeing to find solutions, which we have done. And we don't see that as an issue. I go back to my start as I described earlier. I've never known any aircraft type in my recollection that ever got launched without a wide range of challenges.
There's always issues, always
right?
issues.
Now, how much of what I've just described is a read across to this 350 case with Qatar, I simply don't know. But I'm not surprised that there's a few challenges, because frankly there always will be.
Absolutely.
And we'll play what's in front of us as and when in the future anything should present itself. At the moment, we're having another big red letter day for the 350-1000. We're taking it to London next week. We took the first one into Paris a month ago, and we're doing that because we think the customer experience that we're presenting with it, its environmental credentials, which I couldn't overstate by any stretch of the imagination, are something that are going to give a very special option for us. And 372 seats configuration with 44 in J-class. This is a big machine.
And you mentioned already on product in terms of importance of a premium product, and cutting costs doesn't mean cutting customer experience. But you're updating it, refreshing it all the time with these new aircraft, so it changes again from what it was. You've got a premium economy cabin.
Yep.
And you, as you just said, and people can go and have a look, I'm going to go and look myself at the new economy seat. So you're across the range of, from top to bottom, first class, well, I shouldn't even say bottom, but the economy product.
So yeah, and I think the things that most aviation chiefs point at in the cabin is the seat, the difference and upgrades on business and so on and so forth. But we presented on the Etihad stand yesterday an all-new F&B and soft furnishings proposition. And we've done this for two reasons. First of all, again, we made a commitment to reduce by 80% single-use plastics a number of years ago. What you'll see on our stand is how we've actually achieved that, number one. But simple things, we've gone back to stainless steel knives and forks. And everybody who went on the stand yesterday mistakenly thought that this was the new business class F&B offer. It's not, it's our economy offer. And we're doing it for two things. First of all, with the right cost base, you can trade up your proposition, case in point. But this one's part of an and conversation. It's and we've significantly reduced the environmental implications of it. We're no longer throwing away single-use plastic knives and forks, which, let's face it, for all of us who've used the old single-use knives and forks, they suck anyway, right?
Absolutely.
They normally snap in your chicken.
Exactly.
And Ardle doesn't like that.
The win-win all round.
He's very moody with a snap knife in his chicken. Yeah.
And just tell me, Tony, I mean, you've hinted already in terms of results. I mean, you're an airline that, to earn your living relies on premium traffic. There's a lot of speculation about will business traffic come back. You've said about probably a changing mix. There is going to be business cabin demand, but it may be more premium leisure or more people buying premium economy.
So it's, for me, quite an interesting point, because historically, pre-pandemic, about 45% of the people who were in the business or first class cabin were actually travelling on leisure.
Right.
So of course the nomenclature of business class always used to infer that most of the people who were, turning left and travelling up front were actually business travellers. Not necessarily the case.
Yes.
Now, what we've seen post-pandemic is our premium cabin load factors are higher than pre-pandemic. Now, the mix is different, so the 45% that would have been leisure is now more like 90%. But the load factor is higher because people are quite keen to trade up to more space if they have the means to do so. I think there's probably a correlation with some element of disposable income as a result of the pandemic, coupled with the fact of more space and one's own personal wellness. So we've seen a significant upturn in premium cabin load factors. And back to business travel in the purest form, we're also now starting to see the big corporates getting back into the game.
Right.
And what we've been doing with them is signing them into what for us is the first ever green loyalty program that's out there. It's called Conscious Choices, and it's the ability where the corporates can also do a sign-in with us where they get the carbon accreditation for the offsets of how they can then invest through the ticket price into sustainable aviation fuel, into forestation that's accredited, or mangrove planting, and giving them the tier 3 carbon offset. So we think for big corporates, this is also a way in which they can be far more responsible as they come back to normality as well.
Okay, yeah, I should say, because the clock is ticking, unfortunately, against us. I know there's a lot more you're doing on the environment. I mean, you've said you're using the name also on the aircraft of the Green Liner and the Sustainable 50. You've done a number of special flights. I think it's interesting to see flights you've done in recent weeks where you've worked, for example, with Eurocontrol, and it's about continuous descent using sustainable aviation fuels. I mean, this is a big challenge the industry faces and can't escape, isn't it, in the coming years?
Yeah, I think, look, the pandemic was something unprecedented for commercial aviation, put a huge amount of hurt in the system for everybody. But I guess the one thing we could confidently predict at some stage it would end, and inshallah, we're at the end now or pretty close to it, fingers crossed. But I think the commercial sustainability challenge, or environmentally sustainability challenge for commercial aviation is something that's going to be around for generations to come. The physics of flight obviously don't present an easy answer to it anytime soon. So those two aircraft that you mentioned, the Green Liner, which is a Boeing 787, the Sustainable 50, that's the machine we're going to take to London next week, they are out there as poster children to demonstrate how we can put all sorts of different ideas, be they big or small, together and demonstrate what is feasible and achievable today, but also a means to really bring other people's ideas to bear as well. And we've made some massive steps in the right direction, but I think more than anything else, it's probably allowed us also to shine a far brighter light on this, that it requires not just airlines, not just manufacturers, not just policy setters, regulators and governments, but also the travelling public on how they choose to fly. It needs to connect all of the dots to get anywhere close to net zero by 2050.
I mean, it's a major challenge, isn't it? Because long-haul aircraft, even when we're all long gone, in 50 years' time, they're not going to be able to use electric power or hydrogen power. Maybe regional aircraft, perhaps 320s, might be moving that way, but we have to be doing all these other things, as you say. Let me just ask you, Adel. I mean, we talked about new generation aircraft. I mean, they're already more efficient with the new engines, notwithstanding teething problems in this hot part of the world. What is your philosophy about this in terms of, are you getting questioned a lot about Air Arabia's activity in ESG, environment, sustainability, governance, and so on?
Of course you do, and I think everybody in the industry does. The aeroplane itself is obviously, what Tony's trying to do. He's got the gadgets. Now, all the sustainable fuel itself, is it available? Are the people who owning those other things that complement the ability
Yes.
to have, to get to the targets that you've set, you're able to. And I think those are going to be the challenge on an aeroplane itself, at airports are no different, similar. You just got to sort of take the latest available in the industry and use it. Some brave people like Etihad will test it for us, and if it works, we will all buy it. But I think it's going to take time to achieve those results. Mainly not the aircraft itself or the engine manufacturers. Very interestingly, the new engine that had been produced for the narrow-body aircraft, whether it's 737 or Airbus, both are good fuel-efficient aircraft. So they both produce a 15% less fuel burn. But when it gets to harsh environment, they have a lot of challenges.
Yes.
They're quite good if you're flying on Iceland or somewhere. And those are the things that it will take time to overcome. But yeah, we all got to be in it, and we all got to sort of do our bit. There's a lot of work that our team doing it. How could we improve the little bits on the aircraft and the chip on, where it's even to an extent of a lot of technology to get rid of all the papers and everything else. Those will happen. But the big answer is the engines.
Absolutely.
And that is going to make it or break it. And that is, I have no doubt that in the next few years, the right engines will be produced. Then we'd have a safe fuel to support that. And that will remain to the oil companies and governments to manage.
Do you feel optimistic, as you said, and you said, Tony, it's lots of moving parts and lots of players. Do you feel optimistic, Adil, about in the region here on air traffic control? Because in Europe, we talk about this CESAR, Single European Sky. It's been going on for decades and it's still not there. There's one sky in the USA, and in the Gulf and the wider Middle East, there's military areas and all these issues. There is congestion inevitably at airports like Dubai in terms of ATC. I don't know what work is going on here. Is it being pushed quite hard here as it is in other places to get the politicians to move so we can do something?
John, I think you were in London in June when I was talking at lunch.
I was physically there, but I missed it, unfortunately.
So a comment I made there, I said that the challenge of the aviation industry that has no one owner, it probably has no owner, as so many people have got a finger in it, but no ultimately one body to say, okay, that's the way we're going to drive this industry. And because of that, those sort of difficulties and the time that it takes to happen, I have no doubt that what we're seeing in the region from the sort of all the countries and the government, they do have all put in a target of emission zero. And I think some of them are into 2030, one target, and then they move into 50, another target to go to zero, not just on the aviation, on general. So the awareness is there, the will, and I guess the financial ability is also there. So the region is very much going for it.
But what about air traffic control specifically?
ATM, yeah.
Are they really doing anything?
Yeah, from an air traffic control manager.
Because that can give quick wins.
I know there are a lot of work going on, but you've got to obviously recognize we are also living in a region that
very sensitive,
is quite sensitive, and far too many countries controlled in a different methodology and way. And some of the flights seem to be getting longer than shorter because of those things. So those challenges, one would hope and feel optimistic that it should be ironed out. And we think the environmental pressure that coming in may force some of those decisions to be taken. The will is there, the financial means are there, the political means, something needs yet to be addressed.
I think if I just add very quickly on this one, John, as well. So 3 of our sustainability flights, which were designed with optimum route planning and continuous descent. One was from Dublin, one was from Amsterdam, and one EY20 from London Heathrow last October. On that kind of mid-range sector, 6.5-hour sector, saves 40 minutes and 6 tons of CO2. Now that's the good news. The bad news is the Romans almost designed the roads in the sky, and I'm not being flippant. What I mean by that is, like many cities in Europe, the road system was just built on top of the previous one, which was built on top of the previous one, and you could almost trace it back to the Romans. Most of the air traffic control routing within Eurocontrol, for example, was designed when most aircraft had propellers. So there are all manner of massive challenges here, not in terms of what, but how you do it. But back to the things that we've been doing with the likes of the Greenliner, is actually shining a more accurate light on what the prize is. And on that kind of sector, that's the number. You're talking about 40 minutes, 6 tons of CO2. How you get it done, though, will be about governments, regulators and policy setters cross-continent. So very easy to talk about, almost impossible to fix anytime soon.
Absolutely. Listen, we are officially out of time. I just want to ask you quickly one final comment, and this could in itself bring another hour of discussion, which unfortunately we haven't got time for. We've talked a lot about coming out of the challenges of COVID. We've talked just now about the environment, what both of your businesses individually and jointly are doing for the future. But we do have a very challenging situation right now, sadly, with the conflict in Ukraine. That is a direct, human-induced conflict. As you said, Adol, this region is not unfamiliar with conflict. That has directly affected fuel prices going up. There's worries about consumer pressures and economic outlook. After all that preamble, in brief words, what is your outlook for the year ahead, each of you? Do you still feel optimistic for sustaining profitability or moving to more profitable operations in the case of Etihad?
We hope to sort of, before end of this week, announce our Q1 results.
Okay.
And at the moment, as probably Tony said earlier on, the business seems to be good, and the yields are on the right side. The fuel is a challenge, but always when there is a conflict, the fuel tend to go up. Of course, in this region, not necessarily the $100, but a good fuel oil price is good for the region, because the
Good for some of your travelers.
the economy is good. That means people will have more disposable income to travel. So higher fuel price is not necessarily always a bad thing. And the conflict, for a change this time, is not in this region.
No.
So that's, again, but of course, it does have an impact.
Yes.
I'm optimistic about 2022 from the financial output for our company. Because of the demand, the 2 years of no travel or limited travel, we think the market will remain strong, probably in 22 and 23, if the circumstances that are around us stays the same. So I'm reasonably positive.
Have you had any manpower challenges in ramping up? Because in some parts of the world, that's been a really big headache.
It's been a challenge. You're trying, there are a few things happen, of course. Everybody stopped recruiting for 2 years. A lot of people who were at certain age decided not to come back to work.
Yes. Unlike you and I.
They said, if I'm flying an airplane, if I'm an aircraft engineer and I'm at 62 and 63, do I want to go back for another 2 years and then leave? So they stopped. And the market came back quicker, so everybody, not just aviation, you talk to hospitals, to restaurants, everybody finding a challenge in terms of bringing people back in. It's not been too bad. I think some other countries have been more difficult. It's not been too bad, and we have not had to sort of ground aeroplanes. Pleased to say that all our aircrafts are now flying, and we're bringing more airplanes, setting up 2 airlines. So things are positive. And I believe from the manpower challenge, the cost will go up a little, but I think every month it will look better.
Correct.
And hoping by end of the year, it should stable itself up.
Thanks, Adel. Tony, last word to you. I know you've got a...
Almost the same answer. Cautiously, very cautiously optimistic. I'll start in reverse order. If the cargo rates maintain themselves for the rest of this year, which I think there's a good chance that they will do, and also the sort of load factors that I described before, I'd almost leave this with a call out to everybody in the audience to avoid disappointments. Get onto etihad.com straight away, because at 84% load factors, I want to make sure that you all get the opportunity for a fantastic travel experience as well. And I say that half tongue-in-cheek, but actually half serious to the point. There's a lot of demand out of there, which is the second reason why I'm cautiously optimistic this will be a good year and a big part of the recovery that we all need.
Excellent. Well, Tony, we look forward to watching your results, hopefully delivering less of a red and more of the blue in the coming months, and product development. So, Tony Davis, Etihad Group CEO, thanks very much for your time today. Been a pleasure to meet you. Adel Ali, Group CEO of Air Arabia, always a pleasure to spar with you over years we've known each other. Thank you very much for your time today. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for the Aviation Live session of this year's ATM.